the opinion from February 18th, op-ed page, don't go down the rabbit hole. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do it, isn't helping in the fight against misinformation. Oh boy. So as it turns out, this starts as this kind of banal, not surprising, it shouldn't be controversial suggestion that actually every time you run into something on the internet that you think might not be true, you don't actually need to spend 15 minutes chasing it down. Like you are not obliged to spend 15 minutes chasing down every single thing that you run into in the internet. Boy, if you needed to hear that advice from the New York Times, you've probably got a deeper problem. But it gets, this op-ed gets crazy here. First, we have 4 simple principles, which, at first glance, they seem reasonable when applied appropriately. Refining the practice, and this is, he says, we suggested modeling the process after the way professional fact-checkers assess information. He refined the practice into 4 simple principles: stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context, otherwise known as SIFT for the initial letters of the 4 points: stop, investigate, find, and trace. Mr. Caulfield, so now I'm going to just read a couple of paragraphs here from 3 paragraphs from this op-ed. Mr. Caulfield walked me through the process using an Instagram post from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent anti-vaccine activist, falsely alleging a link between the human papillomavirus vaccine and cancer. Quote, if this is not a claim where I have a depth of understanding, then I want to stop for a second and, before going further, just investigate the source, Mr. Caulfield said. He copied Mr. Kennedy's name in the Instagram post and popped it into Google. Look how fast this is, he told me as he counted the seconds out loud. In 15 seconds, he navigated to Wikipedia and scrolled through the introductory section of the page, highlighting with his cursor the last sentence, which reads that Mr. Kennedy is an anti-vaccine activist and a conspiracy theorist. Is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the best unbiased source and information about a vaccine? I'd argue no, and that's good enough to know we should probably just move on, he said. He probed deeper into the method to find better coverage by copying the main claim in Mr. Kennedy's post and pasting that into Google search. The first 2 results came from Agence France-Presse's fact-check website and the National Institutes of Health. His quick searches showed a pattern, and here it is. Quote, Mr. Kennedy's claims were outside the consensus, a sign they were motivated by something other than science. I'm just going to read that again.
Yeah.
Mr. Kennedy's claims were outside the consensus, a sign they were motivated by something other than science. So I think someone doesn't know what science is.
Yes, you should say, I rest my case. At the point someone has said something like that out loud, you know just how far they are from an understanding of how science works, what facts might be.
Don't dig deep, people, ever. Just trust the authorities, and whenever anything doesn't match the consensus, you know that they're not using science.
Well, I would even point out there's something even weirder in this, which is that the fact that they check is not the question about HPV. The fact they check is whether or not Robert Kennedy
smear,
Jr.
Right?
is a reliable source, as if that's a factual assessment, right?
And the very article introduces him by calling him, a conspiracy theorist and anti-vaccine guy,
right?
And it's a totally separate question as to what his positions actually are in vaccines and how nuanced they are or are not. The fact that we are being informed of the conclusion as we are then we are told how to come to that conclusion, and the way that we are told to come to that conclusion is deeply, deeply flawed and suggests a misunderstanding of how it is that our understanding of reality advances. If you're outside of the consensus, you must not be understanding or dealing with science. No, actually, it's the opposite.
Yes. In fact, what you are really being told is that we will do the job of deciding what is true,
yes,
and we will deliver it to you in a packaged form, and you just simply have to check whether it's on the science-approved list or not. This is wrong in so many different ways. First of all, you'll get this kind of claim from people who, in theory, have gone through graduate school and gotten an advanced degree in science, right? Yep. Those people should know better, right? They've seen the politics on the inside. They understand not only that wrong ideas can get a foothold, they understand that things like the replication crisis emerge, and that those results that were unreplicable were wrong to begin with, right? For all of the years that people claimed that they were based on reliable science, there was a hidden flaw that had to do with the way the statistics were deployed that told us what was right and what was wrong.
And as Daniel says repeatedly in your conversation with him, and as we have said before as well, even if the methods were right, when those methods are applied to the wrong question, you won't get the right answers.
The methods have to be right. They have to be applied carefully. The people who apply them have to be willing to sacrifice their own career well-being in the interest of finding the truth, which is not a common characteristic for people. And it's not a characteristic that science programs now select for. They select for people who are ruthlessly interested in advancing their own careers, which is antithetical to the instinct that is necessary. So the number of ways that the established consensus conclusion can be wrong is indefinitely large, and we are living in an era where those conclusions are increasingly rotten. And to at this same moment be dealing with a question of whether or not there is a responsible way to check whether something is true, it involves seeing whether the person who said it is in some way defective, and at the point you discover they're defective, they're obviously wrong, right? Like, that's not a method I recognize. That's a mind virus right there.